Picture a human from 50,000 years ago walking into your kitchen. They open your fridge and they start to cry. Not from fear, from pure joy, because the stuff you forget about and throw out every week, looks like a god's treasure to them. That's where we're headed today. And it's not the clean little paleo diet you've seen online, with the grass-fed steak and the neat little bowl of berries. I'm talking about what the actual bones and caves and dirt tell us, the real menu. And I'll be honest, some of it is going to turn your stomach. Raw marrow, scraped out of smashed bones, brains, scooped from cracked skulls, insects by the handful, and meat left to rot on purpose. And right near the end, humans eating other humans, with the proof carved straight into the bone. But here's the part that should hook you. Every craving you have today, for fat, for sugar, for salt, for the richest thing on the menu, was built by what kept these people alive. So stick with me, because by the time we're done, you'll understand your own body better than you did this morning. So let's go back about 3 million years, to the wide open grasslands of Africa. And I have to break some bad news about your ancestors. For a long time, they were not the brave hunters you're imagining, spearing giant beasts at dawn. They were scavengers. They waited. A lion would make a kill, eat its fill, and just walk away. Then the hyenas moved in and stripped the rest. And our ancestors came last, to a carcass that had basically been licked clean. So what was left for the creatures at the bottom of the line? The one thing nothing else could get to. Inside those big leg bones was marrow. Soft, rich, packed with fat. And inside the skull was the brain. Both of them were locked away behind hard bone like a safe. Hyenas have jaws strong enough to crack some bones, but not all of them, and not easily. Our ancestors had something better than jaws. They had a rock. And this is where the story really turns. Around 2.5 million years ago, in a place called Gona in Ethiopia, we find some of the oldest stone tools ever made. We call them Oldowan tools, and, they're not pretty. They're basically a sharp-edged stone and a hammer stone. But that simple little kit changed everything. You take the hammer stone, you crack open the leg bone that the lions and hyenas couldn't be bothered with, and you scoop out the marrow. Pure fat. Pure calories. Then you crack the skull and eat the brain, which is loaded with the exact kind of fat a growing body wants. So while every other animal saw an empty carcass, our ancestors saw a meal nobody else could open. Now, why does any of this matter? Because that greasy, fatty, hard-to-reach food is the reason you're smart enough to be watching this right now. Here's the problem. Your brain is an absolute energy hog. It's about 2% of your body weight, but it burns around 1/5 of your energy just sitting there doing nothing. You cannot grow a big, hungry brain on leaves and grass. The math just doesn't work. There simply aren't enough calories in a salad. So back in the 90s, 2 scientists named Leslie Alelo and Peter Wheeler looked at this puzzle, and they came up with what they called the expensive tissue hypothesis. And the idea is simple and, honestly, kind of beautiful. The body is on a budget. It can't afford to run everything at full power. A big gut for digesting tough plants costs a lot of energy. A big brain costs a lot of energy. And you basically can't have both. So as our ancestors started eating richer, easier food, all that fatty marrow and meat, their guts could shrink. And the energy that got freed up went straight to the brain. The gut got smaller. The brain got bigger. We didn't get smart and then start eating better. We started eating better, and that is what let us get smart. Then came the single biggest upgrade in the history of eating. Fire. At a place called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found burnt scraps of bone and ash deep inside the cave, sitting in layers that are around 1 million years old. Not a wildfire that swept through, fire that was sitting right where people lived. And once you can cook, the whole game changes. Cooking is like having a second stomach outside your body. Heat breaks food down before it ever touches your mouth. It softens tough meat, it kills off the nasty bugs, and it unlocks calories that raw food just keeps locked away. A scientist named Richard Wrangham wrote a whole book about this, called Catching Fire. And his argument is bold. He says cooking didn't just make food tastier, cooking made us human. Think about it. Once a fire is doing part of your digestion for you, you don't need those huge teeth anymore. You don't need that giant gut. You get more fuel from less chewing and less effort. And again, that spare energy flows up to the brain. Look at your own mouth in the mirror. Those small, almost dainty teeth are a clue. They're the teeth of an animal that hasn't had to chew raw, tough food in a very, very long time. So that's the meat side of the story. But let's talk about your sweet tooth, because that has a deep history too. So today there's a group of people in Tanzania called the Hadza, and they're one of the last groups on Earth still living mostly by hunting and gathering. So scientists study them, like a living window into our deep past. And when researchers ask the Hadza what their single favorite food is, the answer wasn't meat. It was honey, and they love it. In some studies, honey and the bee grubs that come with it make up around 15% of all the calories they eat. 15%. They'll climb tall, dangerous trees and get stung over and over and over just to get to it. And here's why that matters to you. Out in the wild, sweetness was rare, and it was a jackpot. Ripe fruit and honey were bursting with quick energy, the kind your body could just burn right now. So your brain learned a simple rule. Sweet means survival. Go get it. Eat as much as you can. And the same goes for fat and for salt. Fat was the richest fuel you could find, and salt was rare, but your body badly needs it. So the brain handed out a reward, a little hit of pleasure, every single time you found them. And that system worked perfectly for millions of years, back when this stuff was hard to find. The trouble is, that ancient program is still running inside you, in a world where sugar, fat, and salt are on every corner for a couple of dollars. Your cravings aren't a flaw, they're a survival tool that did its job too well. Now, I promised you the stomach-turning stuff, so let's get into it. We like to think our ancestors ate their food fresh. A lot of the time, they did the exact opposite. There's a researcher named John Speth who studied this, and he makes a strong case that people across the ancient world often ate meat and fish that was, to put it kindly, rotten. They'd cache it, bury it, let it sit for days or even weeks, until it was soft and funky and basically falling apart. To you, that sounds like food poisoning waiting to happen. To them, it was smart. Because when meat and fish ferment, tiny bacteria start breaking the food down. They pre-digest it, so your own body has to do less work. And those same bacteria actually create brand new nutrients, like B vitamins, that weren't really there before. So the fermented version can be easier to digest and richer than the fresh one, which means that rotting cash wasn't some desperate last resort. A lot of the time, it was the plan. And before you feel too superior, take a good look in your own fridge. Cheese is controlled rot. Yogurt is just bacteria quietly eating milk. So is sourdough bread. So is soy sauce. So is the wine and the beer that people pay good money for. We didn't leave fermentation behind. We just put it in nicer packaging and gave it a fancy name. And now for the part that crosses the line most people don't want to think about. In a cave in Somerset, in England, called Gough's Cave, archaeologists found human bones from around 15,000 years ago. And these bones, they tell a really dark story. There are cut marks where the flesh was carefully stripped off, the exact same kind of marks you see on animal bones that were butchered for food. There are bones that were cracked open for the marrow, just like those animal leg bones from millions of years before. And then there are the skulls. Several human skulls were shaped, very carefully, into cups. The researcher Sylvia Bello and her team showed these were the oldest skull cups we've ever found, made with real skill, not just smashed open in a hurry. So were these people just eaten for food? Maybe partly, but here's a fascinating twist. A scientist named James Cole sat down and did the grim math on how many calories are actually in a human body, and the answer is roughly 125,000, which sounds like a lot, until you line it up against a single mammoth or a bison, or even a few deer, which would feed a whole group for far longer with far less risk. A human body just isn't a great meal for the effort. So, wait. So this probably wasn't only about hunger. The careful skull cups, the gentle, deliberate way the bones were treated, it points to ritual, to meaning. These ancient people may have been eating their own dead as a way of saying goodbye or marking something sacred. Which is somehow stranger and far more human than simple survival. So let's walk back to that 50,000-year-old human standing in your kitchen. They open your fridge and try to see it through their eyes. There's fat sitting right there. No carcass to fight a lion over. There's sugar in a jar, no tall tree to climb, and no swarm of bees to survive. There's salt in a little shaker when their whole life they might have traveled for days just to find it. There's meat on a shelf that nobody had to scavenge or butcher or bury for a month. To them, this is paradise. To them, you are basically a god with a magic cold box that never runs out. But here's the thing I really want you to sit with. The body you're walking around in is still their body. It's still running their software. It still screams at you to grab the fat, to hoard the sugar, to chase the single richest thing in the room. Because for almost the entire history of our kind, that was exactly the right move. It's the move that kept your family line alive across millions of brutal years, through ice ages and droughts and starving winters, all the way down to you sitting here today. So the next time you feel that pull toward the greasiest, sweetest, saltiest thing on the table, don't beat yourself up about it. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're carrying a 3 million-year-old survival program that simply never got the memo that food finally stopped being scarce. Every craving is an echo of a hungry ancestor who refused to die. And that, more than any bone or any cave, is what ancient humans really left on your plate. If you want to see what these same people got up to once the sun went down, watch this video next. It'll completely change how you picture them.